Imagine you're building a house.
Okay.
You put all this energy into a beautiful facade, a really welcoming entryway,
Yeah.
the cozy living room. Maybe you even splurge on some top-of-the-line solar panels.
Right. The dream setup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you finish building and you realize you completely forgot to install an exit door.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a problem.
That's a huge problem. And welcome to the deep dive, by the way. I'm so glad you're joining us today because we love designing beginnings, don't we?
We really do. I mean, the enthusiasm of a new project is just intoxicating. Everyone is on board, everyone has ideas, but we rarely want to design the end.
Right, because talking about the end feels like you're planning for failure.
Exactly. It implies failure. And in the world of intentional communities or, eco-villages and co-housing projects, this happens all the time.
It really does. People romanticize the idea of joining these places.
Right.
And, if you are listening to this, you've probably pictured it yourself at some point.
Oh, absolutely. The shared gardens, the communal dinners.
Yeah. That whole utopian ideal of living closer to nature and to each other. But we almost never think about how to actually leave one. So our mission today is to unpack a really fascinating stack of sources.
And it's quite a stack.
It is. We've got architectural blueprints, community governance handbooks, and this really interesting open source rule book called the Regenerative Community Operating System, or RCOS.
Right.
We were looking at what actually happens when someone wants out. And, a really counterintuitive truth emerges from these sources right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think this is the perfect hook for this whole discussion. Intentional communities rarely collapse from a lack of shared vision.
Which is what you'd expect, right? That
Right.
people just stop believing in the project.
Exactly. But they don't fall apart because people stop believing in the communal garden or the solar grid. They collapse because they fail to plan for the inevitable departure of their members.
Wow.
Designing a community that you are, explicitly allowed to leave is actually the secret to keeping people committed in the first place.
That makes so much sense when you say it out loud.
Yeah.
Because before we even touch the money or the legal contracts or, the property deeds, there's just a massive human element to
A
this.
huge human element.
Like if you and I share a neighborhood in a standard suburb and I move away, you might be a little sad. You wave at the moving truck.
Right. Maybe we exchange numbers.
Yeah, exactly. But in a land-based intentional community, someone packing their bags is incredibly disruptive to the people staying behind.
It creates an enormous vacuum, especially when the rules are unwritten. Because when exit pathways are informal or just entirely missing, a departure isn't just a physical move, it's a rupture.
A social rupture.
Right. The whole foundation of these communities is mutual trust. You rely on each other for labor, for governance, for emotional support.
Yeah, you're deeply intertwined.
So if someone suddenly announces they are leaving and there's no structured way to process it, it triggers immediate power struggles.
Oh, I bet.
It breeds deep resentment. And those unresolved, messy departures really erode that foundational trust, making everyone left behind feel anxious and vulnerable.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit because it's basically like a messy romantic breakup where you share a bank account and a friend group.
That is the perfect analogy.
Right. Because if you just vanish in the middle of the night, the friend group fractures. People feel forced to take sides. Some feel abandoned. But if you have an explicit, healthy way to untangle yourselves, the larger community actually survives.
Yes.
And there is a really specific example of this in the sources from a model called ELON. That's equity-linked affinity networks.
Right, the ELON model.
Yeah, they have a formal process for this called Clearness for leaving.
And the Clearness process tackles that emotional rupture head-on. It's fascinating. When a member decides to leave, a formalized meeting is held, and the purpose of this meeting is explicitly not to talk them out of leaving.
Which is totally human nature. Like, if a core member of your project says they want out, everyone's first instinct is going to be, no, don't go, we can fix this, we'll plant different vegetables, we'll change the chore wheel, whatever you want.
Exactly. We naturally want to bargain. And that instinct to bargain is exactly what the Clearness process prevents.
Okay.
Instead, the meeting provides a structured space to just evaluate the shared experience. It's an opportunity to acknowledge, how the departing person has grown, what the community learned from them.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and to honestly discuss the friction that actually led to the departure without trying to fix it.
It gives the remaining members closure.
Precisely.
They get to participate in the transition.
Right.
They don't just wake up one day and feel completely abandoned by someone they shared their daily life with. You are essentially untangling the emotional ties with respect.
And untangling the emotions is the necessary first step. You
Mhm.
really cannot successfully navigate the logistical separation if the community is just paralyzed by a sense of betrayal.
Right, untangling those hurt feelings is crucial, but you can't pay a mortgage with closure.
No, you cannot.
Eventually, you have to figure out who owns the communal tractor.
Right.
So how do these communities handle the actual physical and financial separation? Because if I'm moving a co-housing project, I can't exactly, like, take my fraction of the shared greenhouse with me.
And this brings us to the physical exit models.
That's it.
These dictate how a collective's equity is actually held and redistributed.
Okay.
The financial plumbing can get a little complex, but the underlying logic is pretty straightforward. Let's start with the market equity cooperative model.
All right, market equity.
In this system, you buy a share that corresponds to your specific housing unit. And when you decide to leave, you sell that share on the open real estate market for whatever price the market dictates.
Wait, okay, so if a tech boom happens in the neighboring city and property values just skyrocket, my little eco cabin might suddenly appraise for $1 million.
It could, yes.
So I sell it, I make a huge profit. But doesn't that just recreate the exact same gentrification and pricing out problems that these communities were built to escape in the first place?
That is exactly the issue.
Like 10 years down the line, the next person who wants to join our humble eco-village has to be a literal millionaire. You end up with a gated community for wealthy tech bros, not a regenerative eco-village.
And that is the fatal flaw of the market equity model for intentional communities. I mean, it allows the departing member to build incredible personal wealth,
Sure.
but it completely exposes the community to outside market forces, which basically destroys the original ethos.
Right.
So because of that gentrification risk, communities had to invent a firewall. They swung the pendulum all the way and stripped away individual ownership entirely.
Oh, wow.
This is the group equity cooperative. Here, the community corporation itself owns everything. 100% of the property equity stays with the collective.
So if the collective owns the real estate, what do I actually pay when I move in?
You basically just pay a nominal deposit. Think of it like a standard renter's security deposit.
Okay, simple enough.
And when you leave, you get that exact deposit back, maybe adjusted for some unpaid maintenance fees or damages, but you capture 0% of the property's appreciation over time.
Okay, if I'm listening to this and trying to figure out my long-term life plan, that honestly sounds like a financial trap.
It can be.
Like, sure, it's highly accessible because the barrier to entry is just a deposit. I get that. But I could live there for 15 years. I could be fixing the roof, tending the gardens, pouring my literal sweat into the property, and I leave with absolutely zero wealth accumulated. I can't retire on that.
Which is exactly why group equity models are mostly common in student housing networks or, transient off-grid eco-villages.
That makes sense, where people aren't staying forever.
Right. For people looking to build a sustainable life over decades, it is financially devastating to miss out on building any equity.
Yeah.
To solve this, communities developed what you might call a golden middle ground, limited equity cooperatives, or LECs.
Okay, the middle ground. How does the math actually work on an LEC to balance those two extremes?
The formula basically restricts the return on equity to balance personal wealth building with permanent community affordability.
Right.
When you leave, you get your initial investment back, plus a small, strictly capped slice of the property's growth and value.
Capped.
Yes. The appreciation is usually tied to something like an inflation index or just a fixed percentage, rather than the speculative, crazy real estate market.
So if I buy in for, say, $50,000 and the open market just explodes, I don't get to sell my share for $500,000.
Exactly.
I might leave with $60,000 or $70,000. I get a little bit of the upside to protect my savings against inflation, but I don't get the whole pie.
Right. That capped upside prevents the exiting member from draining the community's wealth
Yeah.
while completely insulating the property from those wild speculative surges.
That's really clever.
It is. And we see this successfully deployed in legacy housing cooperatives in places like San Francisco.
All right.
It actually keeps units affordable for decades.
Now, the sources also mentioned a physical example from Bozeman Co-Housing. In their setup, residents actually own their homes outright, which seems risky based on what we just discussed.
It does seem risky, yes.
But they sign a voluntary covenant for a right of first refusal.
Yes. And this is a key mechanism. If a resident wants to leave, they cannot simply throw their house on a public real estate app to the highest bidder.
Right.
They must offer the home to the community or its internal wait list first.
And that filters for participation,
Exactly.
because you ensure that the person buying the multi-million-dollar house actually wants to participate in the shared labor, the governance, the community meals.
Yeah.
You aren't just getting a wealthy neighbor who wants a quiet vacation home and refuses to talk to anyone.
It protects the social fabric by controlling the entry point during an exit.
Yeah.
But, everything we've discussed so far assumes the exit is voluntary.
Oh, right. The person actually wants to leave. They have their nice clearness meeting. They get their capped equity. Everyone waves goodbye.
Right, but what if the exit isn't voluntary?
Ooh. Okay. This assumes I want to leave. What if I am just a terribly toxic housemate?
Let's hear it.
Like, I stopped paying my dues, I'm hoarding communal resources, I'm constantly starting arguments in the kitchen, and I absolutely refuse to move out of my unit.
That is the nightmare scenario. Involuntary exits are the most dangerous events for any community.
I can imagine.
Forced removal tests the absolute limits of a community's resilience. Because in the default world, if someone won't leave a property, you just use the legal system. You evict them.
And local courts don't care at all about our internal community drama. They just look at the lease. But going through a formal eviction process is awful.
It is deeply traumatizing. And the sources highlight the catastrophic downstream effects of this. Evictions cause loss of housing, disrupted education for children, and they create public court records that ruin a person's future access to housing.
It's a permanent stain.
It really is. It is a massive social rupture that damages both the individual and the community that forced them out. Progressive municipalities do try to use eviction diversion programs, offering professional mediation or landlord risk mitigation funds to resolve these disputes without going to court.
But a community sharing a single kitchen can't exactly sit around waiting for a municipal diversion program to fix a toxic dynamic in their own hallway.
No, they cannot. And this is where the sources take a really fascinating turn into the digital realm.
Yes, the digital realm.
Web3 communities, specifically decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, have had to solve these exact human behavioral problems. But they do it mathematically, using code.
Yeah, the notes mention the Malak DAO, which has a mechanism called rage quit. I mean, I love the name, but for anyone listening who isn't deep into the crypto world, we should probably explain what a DAO actually is before we get to the rage quit part.
Good idea. A DAO is essentially a community that pools its money together and uses self-executing code called smart contracts to vote on how to spend it. Think of a smart contract like a digital vending machine. You put in a token, you make a selection, and the machine automatically dispenses the item. No human manager is needed to approve the transaction.
So the rules just enforce themselves automatically.
Exactly. The rules are written in code. So in Moloch DAO, members contribute capital into this digital treasury in exchange for voting shares.
Right. So what happens when the community votes on something I fundamentally disagree with? Like, I don't want to fund this new project.
Well, in a traditional corporate structure, a majority can easily oppress a minority, but DAOs solve this with the rage quit mechanism.
The rage quit.
Yes. If a majority votes for a proposal that a minority member deeply disagrees with, the smart contract triggers a mandatory grace period before the vote actually goes into effect.
Like a cooling off period.
A heavily weaponized cooling off period. During this window, the dissenting member can literally hit the rage quit button. The smart contract instantly burns their voting shares and automatically returns their exact proportional share of the underlying funds from the treasury directly to their wallet.
Before the vote happens.
Before the vote executes. They bypass the majority vote entirely.
Okay, so it eliminates what the tech world calls the 51% attack.
Exactly.
That's the scenario where a slight majority, say, 51% of the people team up and vote to just steal the resources of the other 49%.
Yeah.
Because if they try that here, the minority just hits rage quit and takes all their money with them before the vote even executes.
Yes. The threat of a mass rage quit forces the majority to seek true consensus, rather than just forcing their will on everyone else.
Oh, that is incredible for voluntary exits.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't like the direction the ship is heading, you vanish and your money just parachutes back into your wallet.
Yeah.
But what if the community wants you gone? What is the digital equivalent of an eviction?
That is called a guilt kick.
Guilt kick. Okay.
If a member is acting maliciously, the majority can vote to execute a guilt kick. The smart contract instantly strips the toxic member of their voting power. They immediately lose their voice in the community.
Wait, hold on. If they lose their vote, doesn't the majority just keep their money? That sounds like theft.
And that's the genius of the code. To prevent theft, the toxic members' funds are automatically converted into non-voting loot shares.
Loot shares.
Yes. Loot shares represent a strict economic claim on the Treasury, but they carry zero political power. The kicked member can then take those loot shares and execute a rage quit at their own convenience to get their money out safely. It perfectly separates political voice from economic interest.
I see the logic. I really do. But I'm highly skeptical about applying this to physical reality.
Fair enough.
We're talking about replacing human empathy and messy social dynamics with, like, a vending machine made of code. You can strip a toxic member's digital voting rights instantly, sure, but you can't smart contract someone's physical bed out of their room.
No, you can't.
The digital realm is fictionless. The physical realm is made of wood and concrete.
You are entirely correct. You cannot code away the physical friction of an eviction. But the underlying philosophy of the guilt kick, instantly separating a bad actor's political voice from their economic equity to protect the community, is exactly what physical communities are desperately trying to achieve.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
And this brings us to the ultimate framework in our sources that bridges these two worlds, the Regenerative Community Operating System. RCOS.
Yes, RCOS. It's essentially an open source operating system, but instead of running on a computer, it runs a human community. It's like a modular rulebook.
It is a meticulously designed governance framework. To solve the tension between messy human emotions and rigid legal structures, communities adopt RCOS. And it operates on one foundational meta rule: explicit beats implicit.
Explicit beats implicit.
Yeah.
Meaning, if it isn't written down, agreed upon, and adopted by the community, it simply does not exist.
There are no unwritten rules in RCOS. Let's look at how it handles the exit door across its different structural layers. Layer 1 is the membership system.
Yeah.
This layer demands that every single person in the community falls into a strictly defined state. You are either an applicant, a trial member, a full member, or an exited member.
Oh, so there is no ambiguous limbo state.
None.
You can't just hang around for months, not paying dues, not contributing to the garden, claiming you're just figuring things out. You are either in, you are out, or you are explicitly in a defined transition process.
Exactly. Furthermore, RCOS delivers an ultimatum to any community using its framework. You must adopt an explicit exit and separation protocol.
It's mandatory.
It is a mandatory artifact. If your protocol is missing or even ambiguous, your community instantly loses its RCOS core compliance. That is how seriously the system treats the right to leave.
So what does a compliant exit actually look like? Because the sources detail several mandatory regulations that prevent a community from abusing its members when they try to leave.
We won't list every legal nuance, but the core mechanisms are fascinating. For example, RCOS mandates unconditional voluntary exit.
Right.
A member must be able to leave at any time without facing social retaliation or punitive financial fines.
Which is huge.
Yes. There is also a strict mandate for due process enforced exits. A community cannot simply hold an angry impromptu meeting and throw someone out. They must follow a predefined conflict resolution ladder.
The rule that really caught my eye was the ban on substitute suspensions.
Oh, that's a brilliant one.
Because human beings naturally want to avoid conflict, right?
Yeah.
If someone is causing trouble, it's really tempting for the community to just say, well, we are putting you on probation indefinitely, or we are suspending your garden privileges until further notice.
Right. They put the person in a permanent timeout box.
Yeah. They do it to avoid the painful hard work of formally processing their exit.
And RCOS explicitly outlaws that. You cannot use indefinite suspension as a coward's alternative to an exit process. You must either resolve the conflict and restore the member to full status, or you must process them through the formal exit protocol. You cannot leave a human being in permanent systemic limbo.
Okay, so RCOS forces you to be honest and explicit about the relationship. But what about the money? We saw how MlockDO handles it instantly, and we saw the limited equity housing models. How does RCOS handle a member walking out the door who wants their cash?
This is governed by RCOS Layer 3, the economic system, because, as you pointed out earlier, you cannot instantly liquidate a physical asset.
Right.
If a departing member demands all their cash at once, they could force a literal bank run on the community treasury. bankrupting the entire project. So RCOS mandates staggered financial payouts.
Okay, so I lose my vote today, but I don't walk out with a briefcase full of cash on day one.
Exactly. Instead of an immediate cash out, a departing member's equity is converted into long-term promissory
Oh,
notes.
interesting.
The community might pay them out over a 3-year or 5-year schedule. This preserves the operational solvency of the community, ensuring they don't have to, sell the communal tractor just to pay off a departing member.
But it still respects the financial contribution of the person leaving.
Yes, it does.
It's essentially taking the logic of the DAO's gill kick and applying it to physical assets. Like
Yeah.
the absolute second I walk out the door, my political voice is separated from my economic equity.
Exactly.
I can't be a zombie governor ruling the community from afar, voting on what vegetables to plant when I don't even live there anymore. But my financial investment is protected and returned to me over time. RCOS is basically a meticulously drafted prenup for utopia.
A prenup for utopia. That perfectly captures it. It removes the panic from the equation. When the rules of separation are clear, fair, and documented long before anyone is actually angry, the community can survive the transition without tearing itself apart.
Man, it is quite a journey looking at these sources today. We started with the deeply emotional human toll of people vanishing and how the Clearness meetings of the Elon network provide closure.
Right?
Then we saw how limited equity cooperatives balance the need for personal savings against the threat of gentrification. We explored the frictionless, code-based exits of DAOs.
The rage quits.
The rage quits, yeah. And finally, the brilliant modular rulebook of RCOS that forces messy physical communities to make the implicit explicit.
And, it all points to a profound shift in how we evaluate success. A healthy community isn't defined by how happily people join it. It is defined by how fairly it allows people to leave.
And if you're listening to this, you might be thinking this only applies to off-grid eco-villages. But these mechanisms have massive implications for the broader economy.
They absolutely do. And this leads to a final thought I want to leave you to mull over, which builds directly on this idea of exit design.
Okay, let's hear it.
Right now, there's a growing movement in the startup world called exit to community, or E2C.
Exit to community. Because usually a successful tech startup's exit means they go public on Wall Street, or they get swallowed up by some massive corporate competitor. The founders get rich, and the users just get monetized.
Exactly. But E2C asks a fundamentally different question. What if the founders sold the company not to Wall Street, but to their own users and workers, using trusts or multi-stakeholder cooperatives?
That is a staggering thought. Because if we can use tools like RCOS to design local, land-based communities that allow members to exit gracefully without destroying the project,
Right.
could we scale that up? Could we eventually design massive global corporations that, when they finally succeed, exit into the hands of the very communities that built them?
Designing the exit not as a failure or, a corporate sellout, but as a handover of power to the people who actually matter.
It changes how you look at every organization you interact with. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you find yourself admiring a beautifully built system, a new neighborhood, or even a shiny new tech platform, well, don't just look at the welcoming entryway. Check the blueprints. Make sure they remembered to build you an exit door.